The Jill and Stacy Show with Jacob Saltzman.
Randy Stigall.
Thank you. Tonight I come to jog your collective memory of what Ms. Bird stated at the 14 September 23 board meeting. After quite a few public speakers presented their views on SB 150, DEI, CRT, and for myself, Panorama, essentially Ms. Bird, speaking for the board, said you appreciated the public's input, it would be considered, and beyond all else, the board and the administration would follow the law. Given that commitment, I think the decision by the administration to utilize grant funds from some part of the state education establishment to hire a group called Engaged to Learn, that's with a numeric 2, is counter to this commitment, if not in letter, at least in intent. In an August 24th, 2020 22 article, Education Week specifically reports that in Kentucky, the intent of SB 1 will be circumvented by hiring Engaged to Learn to proselytize teachers in DEI so they will foster DEI in every aspect of their teaching. The tone of the article conveys a dismissive attitude toward the Kentucky legislature and its intent in SB 1. I can assure you this article is making the rounds to legislators who will be gathering in January. However, that's just the background. You need to decide if your commitment to the law will be based on intent or letter. At the same time, you need to consider that Dr. Detweiler is out of bounds, requiring all his direct reports to be trained, proselytized, or whatever it is, by Engaged to Learn. Making circumvention of the law a condition of employment might be a step too far. I ask you to include this in the record.
Thank you, Mr. Stigall. We will.
What Randy's trying to point out is it's not an option, it's you have to do it. And so anyone under Dr. Detweiler, what it sounds like, I would like to look into this to see, is this mandatory? Do we have to do it? This obviously came out of the DEIB committee. And so it was presented to the DEIB committee. It was never voted on by them if this is something that they wanted to do. So that's something else. I wish we would actually once again, concentrate on what DI is really about instead of bringing all these things pushed by the state. And instead of trying to help kids that need the help, we're once again just doing something the state is pushing out.
Mrs. Young.
My first question on item M, proposal 1 on the LSS data room. Let me pull that up real quick.
This is a good question, and I love their answer.
For the generator, they're wanting to go, let's see, for the backup generator, why are we adding a generator from one that goes from 24 hours to 48 hours?
Yes, go ahead, Ms. Best.
Go ahead.
Yeah, come up to the microphone if you would.
Go ahead and answer this.
Or borrow Linda's.
I don't know.
I like this from over here. So because the data room houses all of the technology for the district, as we've talked about before, that if we were to have an outage or a power to go away from that area, being able to increase that to 48 hours so that it could still be functional and to get the district or continue to keep the district where we needed them to be was considered beneficial to do that at this time.
But you could bring a fuel truck in. I understand. I know how important it is, but we're never out of. When have we ever been out of power for longer than 24 hours? And in that time, we could bring a fuel truck in to fill up the one we have. Just to save $10,000.
Yes.
Does anyone have an answer for that?
I know something I hear from my IT husband a lot, who's been in the field for 26 years, and this is just something I hear a lot. You turn things off, they gonna break in IT. It guaranteed. He's like, don't ever turn it off. Never, ever, ever,
Right.
ever, ever unplug or turn it off. And I get that, but I'm just thinking about the ice storm we just had. There were 4 days. Yeah. I'm just thinking about the ice storm we recently had. How long were we without power at the district? 3 days?
Before Christmas last year, I was without power for over 5 days, and my pipes froze. I still have leaks.
Ike, back in the day, as a small business owner, I had 2 generators out on Dixie Highway running up to my computers, and I had to drive all the way to Crittenden to try to find some gasoline after an entire day. So, I mean, it's very abnormal that it would need that kind of time, but in ancient history, in the last 20 years, there's probably been 2 or 3 times I can remember that we would have needed that. And it's very hard to get those couple fuel trucks if there's an ice event or something else that's going on there.
Okay, thank you.
Good question, though.
Well, I've got another one.
Go right ahead.
For the
Floor is
same-
yours.
For the,
So the interesting thing for me is all of their answers, 5 days, whatever, it still doesn't help with the 2-day generator. So like we still have the problem. It's like, once again, okay, we're just going to vote to spend the extra $10,000 when it doesn't matter. Like we're still going to have to go find gas. We're still going to have to, but this goes to the board just approving whatever we ask. So I don't get it.
So what did they do with the generator they currently have? Are they going to keep that as a backup generator to the new backup generator, or
Probably not. I guarantee you they're getting rid of that and just buying a new one.
so will it go to the surplus?
Probably.
And then where does the stuff from the surplus go? Because I was looking at that surplus list and it was a ton of electronics, Chromebooks, computers, desktops. And I'm thinking, where does that, do they sell them?
I was told like Ackerman Middle didn't have a surplus of computers. I don't know what was on the list, but I asked about that in SBDM.
It's in the agenda meeting minutes. When you go to the bottom, it has surplus, or it's with the treasury report. Because I found the report and there was a ton of stuff in there, and I'm like, where does all this go?
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, it just goes to show spending money is not a problem for them. But we'll get to it later on where they're nervous about spending money on a superintendent search. Generator, spend it. For a good superintendent, keep it in our pockets.
for the data room, same, on proposal 3, what's the poor soils for the 6th? If I thought we were relocating to an existing building.
So it's an addition on the back side of that building. So at one time historically, that we do believe was a farm area. So when they went to excavate, there had various assorted things had been used to fill in what they think was a pond at one time. So it was very poor quality. It was very soft. Lots of debris were found in that, so they had to excavate it and then go offsite and bring in more supportive soil so that they could put the addition on there.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
you're welcome.
And overall, the buildings and renovations we've done over the last 3 decades, we've run into poor soil in Boone County or Springs.
How many
multiple
trucks was that?
times.
That I do not know, but I will find out
No,
for you.
no big deal, no big deal. I'm done with that part, but I do have more questions.
Go ahead.
On BB, the clinical affiliation agreement between Beckfield, where's the agreement? It's not on here. It's not attached.
Well, not one other school board member caught that.
No.
Whose job is that to put that in there?
Michelle
Got it.
in the Christmas tree shirt.
So can we pull that item until we see that contract?
Correct.
Yeah, let me check on the date here just to make sure we know. Mrs. Rootman, can you give us a little context on this contract and the time frame, the urgency of the time frame? Is there one?
Clinical agreements are for nurses to come in who are finishing up their nursing degrees at Beckfield. They come in and we have some of our nurses do preceptor work, which means guide them through and check out some of their skill levels. And we usually start right in January so that they are finished with that practice work that by the time the end of their college year is out. So it would be nice if we could have them be able to be with us in January.
When do they start classes back? I mean, I think the 14th is our January board meeting.
I don't know what time when they start classes back, but they have to make
The 11th, excuse me.
background checks and all of those kinds of things.
Is it the same type of agreement as the others that are also in here with Western Governors University, Xavier University,
Yes, ma'am.
and Thomas More?
Yes, ma'am. And we've been with Beckfield for many, many years. We've got new ones, Thomas Moore's, not Thomas More, but Western Governors is new to us, Xavier's new to us this year. But Beckfield has been with us at least 6 years.
It is a general agreement. I can read a few highlights if that will assist the board. Clinical education of students is the primary purpose of the agreement. There's no financial obligation on behalf of either party. They agree to follow any appropriate policies and practices from our school district. And it goes on with the college's responsibilities. They will maintain planning and execution of the education program of their staff working within our schools, and our staff. Faculty member of the nursing education program is responsible for planning the student's experience that would be in our school. Essentially, they will take on all the required work to plan and help implement. They would just be working alongside or monitoring or watching some of our staff. Good for 1 year, essentially from January to the end of the 2024. Termination can be by either party, 60 days written notice.
Is that the contract?
It is, yes.
Why don't we just defer this particular decision for a few minutes and let this pass it? So if a board member wants to look it over, they can look it over.
Sure. You want to pass it down to Mrs. Shaw? Because I know when I first looked at it, and then I did another review last night, I am 99% sure it was there. Was it there the first time you looked at it?
No.
Did you ask anyone for it then?
No.
That would have been helpful.
Well, at least she noticed it wasn't their bird.
Right? 99%.
Because I agree, it's hard to make a decision if you don't know what you're making it on.
No communication with anybody.
Yeah, if that wasn't attached, that's our mistake.
While that's kind of being reviewed, did you have any other
Yeah, I did.
items? Okay,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Item double G. Mr. Turner's AASA National Conference trip. Is that is that something that's in his contract? That he has to attend?
He is allowed up to 4 associations, that he is contractually permitted to have, which would cover, and always has covered under a superintendent's contract, any activities of professional development along with those associations.
So this is one of them?
Yes, it is. Because he has to specifically name the organizations he wishes to be
So
associated
even,
with.
even with him retiring 3 months after, or 4 months after this?
His contract is in force as written until June 30th.
I think one of the things, oh, I didn't interrupt.
Go ahead.
I think one of the things that I've seen with executive hires, when you look at, in my case, it was higher ed, when we look for our next superintendent, it is a two-way conversation about whether or not they want to come here. And one of the things that I think will determine who does want to come here and what caliber of person wants to come to the district, they will look directly at the board and how they support their lead learner. So my fear is if we stop supporting Mr. Turner's growth as a lead learner, that will impact potentially our candidate pool as we look at a national search for the next leader of the district. And I mean, I know.
Yeah. So one thing I'm looking at his contract now. It's for professional or civic organizations related to his position as superintendent, and of value to the district. So I think that's one thing we need to point out is it has to be value to our district. So what is he coming back with from these conferences that are value to the district? Because if they're not, then it's actually breaking his contract. So what in the last 4 years as he's gone to these things has he brought back to our district that has been value? Otherwise, he's going to San Diego on our dime just to go to San Diego. Now, the lead learner thing, I get that. If he was going to continue on at some position in our district, he's retiring. And so we no longer have to support the lead learner as what Maria says. It doesn't hurt us in our future of hiring a superintendent. Anybody who looks at our school board is going to see how dysfunctional it is. The reason it's dysfunctional is they've all lost trust in Matt's leadership. So if your board is this dysfunctional in the sense of they don't agree, they don't always agree, they don't always see eye to eye, it's because of Matt's leadership, which gets brought up in just a minute when Cindy says, well, my meetings have stopped with Matt Turner. And Karen said, oh, well, you should have told me that. None of them meet with Matt Turner. They don't have a meeting before the meeting to get everyone on the same page, which goes to the trust factor of this is why it's dysfunctional. Any good leader is going to look at this and go, this is not a board problem. It's a previous leader problem. And I have to come in and fix building the relationships with the board to make sure that they are going to support me as the lead learner. I understand he's the lead learner, but when you don't trust the lead learner, there's technically 2 people on there that trust the lead learner, Maria and Karen. They vote yes to every single thing that he wants. They were going to vote for a contract that they didn't even see. Why? Because they just do whatever he wants. The other 3, they don't trust him. That's an issue. When you have 3 out of the 5, which goes to say that's why he's retiring, because the board is so split on trusting him. So what Maria is saying is I understand that in the grand scheme of things, that's not our situation. There are a lot of people that want to come to Boone County, or that would come to Boone County to be our superintendent. It's a good school district. We just got to have a better leader that can build trust, not with just our board, but with our community.
When we hired a provost, that was one of the things that they asked, how have you supported the last provost? And I would hesitate to say, oh, well, we actually stopped all of his professional learning opportunities before he left. That gives me a lot of pause. So just something that I've seen.
I would go on to say, just as I mentioned when I put my statement out about my retirement, that I've got 6.5 months to go. I'm not going to stand still during that time. I'm going to continue to work, continue to push. You can ask any of our cabinet members. We had a long conversation when I gave that notice to them, is that we're going to push hard this second semester. So I'm not going to coast in that last half of my final year. There's work to do. And as the lead learner, going to activities like that to ensure that we're learning and working and trying to make our school district the best, that involves professional development from the top through the entire organization.
Matt's been the superintendent for 3.5 years. This is the first full report we've gotten from Portrait of a Graduate, which is his strategic project or strategic plan for our district in the 3.5 years. Happened on the school board meeting after he announced his retirement. The interesting part is it's his last way of saying, look at everything I did. His retirement letter video was one of the most arrogant letters that I have ever read. It was all me, me, me. Look at everything I've done. If I was a part of his team or a part of his cabinet, I would be pissed off that there was nothing about his team that had done anything. It was all him.
Well, it goes back to leadership. Leaders don't say I, they say we.
We, and he never once mentioned any part of his team. It was all, look what I've done. This is what I've done. He just said it again. I'm not going to sit still. I'm going to keep pushing forward. And if I was the board, I would say, no, you are going to pause. The next superintendent could come in with a different direction. And I hope he does, because once again, the reason why there's no trust is because of his leadership. He has gone too far from what our community, who our community is, what they want. And, it's poor leadership on his part.
Yeah, he's just checking off boxes. He's just doing what he's told.
I want to, not by any means speaking for Mrs. Young, but the way I've heard her questions tonight are mostly just about money. For me, the question about the trip to the conference wasn't, I understand that the professional development and the contract, but just like the generator question, these small amounts of money can add up. And so it's just purely a financial question, in my opinion, about do we need to still spend the money, and not related to, your retirement or anything like that, for me anyway. I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, what people also need to understand is that membership and trip is going to cost our district about $16,000. So it's $3,000. That's just to attend the conference. That doesn't include his travel, and that doesn't include the membership fee of about $10,000. And so we have to understand that's $16,000 of our district money. $10,000 on a generator, 16 on this. That's $26,000. It's a paraeducator at a school that we need. Even if it's for 1 year, you're giving a teacher, a paraeducator for 1 year.
I appreciate Mrs. Young's pointing out of the questions that she's had this evening so far.
No, I agree. I mean, we are here to ask questions. I would only think that there would be consideration for the staff that if you find something wrong with the agenda 5 days ago, you ask about it. Where is it? Ask me or ask the board chair, whoever the next board chair is. If you don't feel comfortable reaching out to the district office staff, which anyone sitting on this board should, you're a board member. They're here to be our resources and give us information that we need, if it's information that's ready to be disseminated, and sometimes that's not always the case. But this moment could have been avoided with an email or a text or a phone call to say, hey, I don't know what's wrong. I don't have the Beckfield contract.
I wrote it on my notes, and then I had a million other things to do, and I didn't think about it again until I got here tonight. My apologies.
And I understand that.
If I was still having my meetings with Mr. Turner before the board meetings, I might have thought about it again, but we don't have meetings anymore.
Well, that's fixable too with a phone call or a text. But if you're going to just shut down and not do that,
I'm not the one that stopped this.
well, again,
This isn't the time or place for this conversation.
yeah, that just, that needs to be handled elsewhere.
It's amazing that our lead learner wants to go to conferences, but he wants to stop having meetings with our board members. So this is not a. I find it interesting that we want to take up for him when it comes to the lead learner, and he doesn't want to sit still. He wants to keep going. When's the last time he's met with the board member before the board meeting, as Cindy is saying? It obviously stopped at some point. She made it very clear that she was not the one to stop the meetings. And once again, Karen and Maria don't want to hold him accountable to what he's supposed to be doing. Karen has known that he's not been meeting with the board members. That's her responsibility as the board chair to hold him accountable for that. We have done a poor job the last 4 years of holding him accountable for what he's supposed to do, which is why his leadership is all over the place. Now, you talk to people in the district office, they can't stand working for the guy. He has no vision. They don't know what leadership lenses he's looking through. They can't move the ball down the field because they don't even have a clue what his end zone looks like. And that's the problem with our board. It's the same way. He doesn't communicate in a clear way to them either.
But Karen has no business lecturing other board members. Like, you're there to get information. Cindy doesn't work for Karen.
Right.
So she has no business lecturing Cindy on the fact that she wants to ask questions, or the fact that she may have been too busy leading up to the school board meeting to check in with anyone to see if she could get any of it. And you know what, Karen, shame on you because you didn't notice the contract wasn't in there in the first place.
And she's done the same thing. She's asked questions before. If you have what she is pointing out is you should never ask a question at a board meeting. All these questions should be asked before the board meeting. Well, she sat up there and asked her fair share of questions also.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So if you don't want to ask questions at the board meeting, then don't let them ask questions. But that's what this is for. Cindy was voted in by a group of people who want her to ask questions. And I'm pretty sure there's one board member up there who asked the district office for information and was told, you're not getting it. So yeah, you do have to do things like this because they're not going to answer questions for every board meeting, but they do for Maria and Karen, and the rest of them are left in the dark.
Actually, you're correct about that. I've spoken to multiple board members that said that they do not get information from the district's office because they can't. They've asked for information. They're not given it. They've asked to speak with the attorney. Apparently, they're not even allowed to do that.
Well, Jesse's mentioned it multiple times at board meetings that he's asked for things and he has to bring it up at board meetings because it's never brought back up for him.
Right.
Carolyn's the same way. She's been wanting to do a audit on technology. Where's that? That was brought up.
She did ask for that in a meeting.
That was asked 3 or 4 months
The
ago. She
usage
asked for that.
Yes.
We still don't have that.
Well, she wants to put together that task force.
Yeah. Well, they're not going to let her do that because that's going to show how much money we really spend.
Right.
Yeah. So over the next, there's going to be a link that you can actually click on to listen to this. It's about an hour, a little longer than an hour. What would y'all say?
It was pretty long.
Pretty long. And what they're doing is they're just discussing the next superintendent search, what to do. So it's always been practice to hire an outside firm. I actually don't mind that. I think it's probably the best thing to do. It streamlines the process. What I find interesting is, Karen's part of an organization for the KSBA that she's the president of, and she takes herself out of the conversation for the most part. She does, include some comments, which she's been through this process a few times with Boone County. But the interesting part is the biggest conversation we have here is spending money. And so there's a couple of the consulting firms that are less than $10,000, and then the rest of them are going to be 50 to 60. A lot of these are percentages off of what the superintendent makes. That's typical in the business world. You go to hire a CFO, CEO, COO, the consulting firm is going to take a percentage of what the actual position makes. So that's very, very common, which is why we get up into the 30, 40,000. What I would just like to point out through this whole conversation is you have people who are against spending the money to hire a superintendent, which I feel like is the most important hire we're going to make for the next 4 to 8 years in our district. But we'll spend money on a $10,000 generator and not ask a question. Or we'll spend money on a $16,000 trip for our lead learner, not ask a question.
Or $80,000 for a panorama survey.
Not ask a question.
I know, but are they just going to end up getting us another one of him? Because then it just doesn't seem worth it.
Well, that's a good point. And I think that's what I would say is the last few times we've hired a superintendent, we've used the KSBA, and we get a Matt Turner. You know, Karen goes on this thing of like, hey, we used the KSBA and we got the very best that we have.
He was in our own backyard.
He was in our own backyard. What's interesting is the board wasn't even all in agreement of hiring him. And so there were people that they had to talk into on the board to even hire him. The chairman of the board at the time was his student was at Raleigh High School or had been at Raleigh High School with Matt Turner. I still think this whole thing was set up for Matt to be able to retire with his high 3 of at superintendent's pay, you know, set him up pretty for retirement. Honestly, is what I think is done. What it's done is it's set our district back quite a bit. And so for me, I think we need to go out and find the very best consulting firm. I don't care if it's 10,000. I don't care if it's 50,000. I think in the report we had 98 million at the bottom line. I think we can afford the 50,000 to go out and find the very best. Maria actually, I think would be for it. From the conversation, sounds like she's been a part of the process with her provost, and in the higher education, of course, they are going to hire the very best consulting firm to do that. So
I just want a good superintendent who's not going to fall lockstep with the agendas, and I'm not sure where they would find someone like that.
Yeah, and that's the thing for me is the hard part is not everything the state pushes out is bad. And I think even with the new reading curriculum that Boone County's adopted, that the state, it's recommended by the state, the letters, that's not a bad program. I think it's going to help our kids with reading. I really do think that's going to be a good thing that we've done. So it doesn't even necessarily have to do with not doing anything the state pushes out, but having a leader with a backbone that can push into. I know Randy Poe had multiple conversations with the state of we're not going to do this at this time, and he would push back into the state. And I just think we need a leader that has led before, that has no problem pushing back into the state, knowing what's best for our community.
Yeah, when I talk about agendas, I'm not necessarily talking about KDEs. I'm talking about the global national agenda from Ed Leader 21 and Battelle for Kids.
Yeah.
Because that actually has nothing to do with educating students whatsoever. That if you look at their websites and what they have put together, that actually has nothing to do with educating. And he's been lockstep pushing that. And KDE is also pushing that, but that came from Jason Glass because he set it up originally in Colorado, working with Tony Wagner of the Gates Foundation.
Yeah.
That's where all of that started. So that's what I mean by just coming in, putting the agendas in place, and not caring what happens with the community.
Stacey, who is it? What conference is he going to that we just voted to say yes for? What was that called?
ASA.
And who are they connected with?
They are also connected with Portrait of a Graduate, Battelle for Kids.
Yeah. So let me explain how this works. And I know people probably know this for the business world. It works the same way for education. When he goes to San Diego, he's being wined and dined by these organizations that Stacey just mentioned. So they are whining, they're taking him out to nice dinners, they're taking him out for drinks, whatever that looks like in their world. And they are putting on the hard sell. We want you to push this in your district. And that's what he's bringing back to our district. And so he's not just going out there to be the lead learner and learn things. He's going out there to be wined and dined and report back how he has implemented these agendas from these large corporations and how it's working in our district. I think people get lost that happens in education also, not just the business world, but
Well, we already sent him. Wasn't that just this summer? We sent him to Ed Leader 21 out in California, and that is led, their CEO is a lobbyist for the Podestas. Not currently, apparently, but he was literally a lobbyist for the Podestas, and he runs that company, Ed Leader 21, which is tied to Battelle for Kids. They even say that on each other's websites.
yeah.
So it's this same group of people that he was just with not that long ago.
Well, they're all tied together.
Right.
And that's my whole thing is like part of the contract for him to go to these things is they have to be beneficial for the district. So what has he brought back that's been beneficial for the district? That's my only question. When are we asking them as a board, can you give us a report? Like that's one of the questions I would love for one of the board members to ask. Okay, you're going to go in the middle of the year, you're going to report back what you learned that's beneficial to our district, because that is part of the contract.
Here is how to find the Boone County, Kentucky School Board meeting videos. Type in the search bar, Boone County, Kentucky School Board. Search. You can hit videos, and they typically pull up here. Here's December, September's, August. And if you want to watch it live, you just click live, and it'll be featured here on this page. Here is how you access the school board agenda. Go to your search bar, type in Boone County, Kentucky School Board Agenda, and hit search. And you want to go to the one that says portal.ksba.org. Click link. And you always want to click on the date so that you receive all of the documents that are attached to the agenda. As you see here. And if there's something in particular that you're looking for, you can do Control F, type in maybe surplus, and hit enter. And then it'll pull up everything that revolves around surplus. And don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Rumble, BitChute, and YouTube. Subscribe and like. And if you'd like to contact us regarding a story you want us to cover, send us an email at jillandstacy@protonmail.com.
You're welcome.